Hi, my name's Steve, and today I want to show you a little bit about suspension. I've got this little cartoon truck I created here, and I wanted to make sure that the suspension was working correctly. So if I'm moving the tire around, or let me just hide the body here, or if I'm moving the car around, this suspension works the way it's supposed to. And I found a simple way to do that after a lot of trial and error. I'd like to show you that today. So the first thing I'm going to do is read in just a suspension that I haven't done anything with. Let's take a look at the different components of this. I've got a top strut, I've got a bottom strut, I've got two springs, a compressed spring and an expanded spring. I've got an axle. I've got a locator at the top that we're going to be parenting to, and I've got a custom manipulator. And there's some great places on the internet to show up custom manipulators. I'm not going to go into how to model this except to say that these are just a series of cylinders, and this is a helix that I created and expanded it, duplicated it, and it contracted it and duplicated it again so that they would have the same topology, because I'm going to use a blend shape to create this, to make the spring work. So the first thing I want to do is I want to start parenting some things together. And I want to I want to group my strut and my two springs together. So I'm going to select them all, hit Control G, and you'll notice in my outliner I've got this group. I'm just going to call it top strut. And the pivot point's down at the origin, and I want it to be at the top of my strut. So if I hit D, my icon turns from a move point to the pivot point, and if I select my V key at the same time, I can snap that vertice right to the top of this locator, and that's what I've done. So I've got that snapped up there, and the next thing I want to do is I want to parent these guys to this locator. What I'm going to do that is I'm just going to grab this in my outliner, middle mouse, click and drag to the top strut, and there it is. It's now a child of that. I also want to parent this bottom strut to my manipulator here, so I'm going to just middle mouse drag that down there, and there it is. Now the next thing I want to do is I want these things to be, the top strut and the bottom strut, to be aiming at each other so that when they move they aim correctly. So we're going to go into constraint, aim constraint, and I'm going to hit the option box because we may need to change our vector. And I know we need to change it right now. Right now the vector I've got here is a +1. I know that's because if I'm going to aim this axle at this manipulator, I need that as +1. So I grab the thing that's going to aim at and the thing I want aiming, which is the axle, hit apply, and now no matter where I put this manipulator, that axle follows it. For this bottom strut, in Y, I want a +1. So I'm going to grab this top group, and then that's what we're going to aim at. Then grab the strut, hit apply, and you notice it shifted a little bit there, but now it's aiming at my top strut. I know for my top strut, I need this to be a -1. If I leave it at 1 and we try, I select what we're going to aim at, and then I select this group, this top group, and I hit apply. You see what happens. So I'm going to undo that. Let's select in here. Okay. Let's make this a -1. Hit apply, and now everything's moving the way we want it to. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Let's close that out. I've got everything aiming where I want it to aim and working where I want it to work. And so next thing I want to do is I want to address this spring. And to do that, I'm going to go to, I'm in my animation module, and I want to go to Windows, Animation Editors, Blend Shape. So my Blend Shape window comes up, and I want to blend the expanded spring with the compressed spring. I go to Edit and create Blend Shape. Now my springs are connected. Well, I don't really need to see this one anymore, so I'm just going to hide it. Control H is what I use to hide it. So now I've got this expanding, contracting the way I want it. I'm going to keep this blend shape window up. I'm just going to move it off to the side because we're going to be using it in a minute. Okay, now the fun part comes. And we need a way to control how this spring is going to work. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to Create, Measure Tools, Distance Tool. I'm going to use the Distance tool. So if I select that Distance tool, I'm going to go to my front view. And I want to connect the top of my strut and the bottom of my strut. And this gives me two locators and a distance dimension. And I want the top of my strut. I'm going to use my Move tool again and use my D key and my V key to snap the top. Whoops. Let's try that again. Oh, actually, I don't want the D key. I just want to snap that locator right up there. Oops. Start again. So I want to use my V key. I'm going to snap that locator right up there. Grab the lower locator. Snap it down at the bottom. Okay. And the pivot points are really, really important. So I've got these pivots where they need to be. So that's why these aim things are happening the way they're supposed to happen. Okay, now I want to parent these locators together. I want to parent the top locator up to the top of my strut and the bottom locator down to this wheel manipulator. And if you notice, when I do that, they stay with each of those and this distance changes. Now, it doesn't really matter what that number is because Maya's going to figure out how to make this work. So now we want our spring to be able to match whatever we do with our the top of our strut or the bottom of our strut. So I'm going to go to my front view so it's a little easier to see. And I think I'm going to go to wire mode. Grab this top strut, move my top down so that when it's compressed, there's a specific number on this distance. Again, you don't need to remember that. Maya's going to do that for us, and that's kind of where the magic's going to happen. And to make this work, we're going to use a set-driven key. So we go to Animate, Set-Driven Keys, and we click on Set, and this window comes up. Now we want the driver to be our distance. So if we select our distance and we hit our down arrow key, we will get our distance shape node. And we want our distance shape node, and we load that in driver because it's going to give us all of these different things we can do. And the one we're interested in is way at the very bottom. It's called distance. And this distance is going to drive our blend shape. And we want the blend shape node. So remember, I've got this window back up. So I'm going to select our blend shape. Move that back out of the way and load that as the driven. So here's our distance. We're going to connect our distance with our spring right here and set a keyframe. We set a keyframe at when it's compressed. Now we're going to move this up, and it doesn't have to be exact because we're going to fix that later. And I'm going to expand it. You notice it's not quite right, but it's close enough, and I can show you how we're going to fix that later. And now we're going to set another keyframe. So we set a keyframe there. I don't need this anymore. We're going to close that up. And now when I move this around, my spring is expanding and contracting. Though it's not quite doing it the way I want it to. It's a little bit funny. And we're going to talk about that here right now, figure out why that is. So the way we're going to fix that is we're going to go to Window, Animation Editor, and we'll pull up our graph editor. So our graph editor, I'm going to grab this blend shape again. I want to select my spring, hit F so I can see where the F curve is. This is the F curve for what happens when the spring expands. If you notice, we've got an ease in and an ease out. Well, we want that to be linear. So if I select both of these endpoints and click on the linear icon right here, that turns that linear. And now, when I expand this and compress it, this works a little bit more like what we want. But we still got this funny thing going on down here at the bottom. Let's pull that. So there's about its its biggest height? Well, I'm gonna select this again, and if I select this endpoint, this is where it's at on one, and I can move that. Let's see, let's move it. If I move that down, you notice now this matches where it needs to be. So now it's working just the way we want it to, whether it in the bottom or the top. Bottom of the suspension or the top of the suspension. Oops. No. Okay. All right, I hope that's been helpful. I think it's a real simple way to be able to create springs and without too much bother. Thanks a lot, and I hope you learned something out of it. Anyway, thanks a lot for your, thanks.